Okay. A lot of you probably already know my name is Tara. A lot of other places I go by Fun and Speech. But really quickly, a little bit of background about how this kind of came to be. About a month ago or so, maybe a few weeks ago, Dan and Scott did a presentation just for SLPs, speech language pathologists. And as we were preparing for that, I was bringing up some things that were a little bit different because a lot of people know SLPs are like over 95% women. So I was saying, certain things you kind of have to look at differently. We're the ones who are usually taking off maternity leave for a while. And, because of that, getting lower on the pay scale in certain ways, and a lot of other things that were specific to women. And as we were going through this, Dan and Scott said, oh, well, what if we do like a women in personal finance event and just have some women run it, like financial advisors or something. And I said, oh, that would be great. And then I thought, like, I can't wait to attend. And then we got the email and I asked to be on this panel along with Jackie, Danielle, and Jessica. So that's kind of how this came to be. But Jessica, you can start with the first slide. Dan or Scott, do one of you guys want to do the disclaimer?
Sure, I'll jump in. Nothing presented or discussed is to be construed as investment or tax advice. This can be secured from a vetted, certified financial planner. And at the bottom of the homepage of 403bwise.org, we have a resource you can use that will let you know the questions to ask when you interview a financial planner, and then also resources to find the right kind of planner, which we would describe as someone who is a fiduciary planner.
And a little side note, I actually used all of their resources and I hired my own CFP with all of those resources and she was great. So that's just a little side note. But my name is Tara. I am a speech language pathologist and I have some things here like my timeline. I would never normally just introduce myself and say, I bought a house in 2016 and got married in 2017. That's a little weird. I'm not that weird. But as us four women were talking, we all got on Zoom. I had never even met Danielle or Jackie before. And we were like, okay, well, what do we want to talk about? We have this platform and we have no idea what we want to do. So we were all just kind of telling our own story, our own personal backgrounds, and we kind of realized something cool came about. Each one of us were kind of at different places in our lives, and we can kind of walk you through like right from graduating college all the way up to retirement because Jackie is already retired early. So, and like everything in between. So there are a lot of different kind of life chunks, life moments that we are going to kind of cover. So maybe you might not really identify with one person, but you'll definitely identify with somebody else very closely. And I think that you will learn a lot from every person, even if you're not specifically in that situation. Like people ask me, well, what are your plans for retirement? I have no idea. I just want to make it to summer break, to be honest. But when we were all going, I felt bad because I was constantly stopping these women. I'm like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have more questions. Can you talk more about this? Like they have so much good information, great stuff. So I just kind of mapped this out. So I'm kind of taking you like right from graduation. Looks like I don't even know when I graduated. Graduated grad school in 2015 and it's now 2021. So a few years ago. And then I bought a house. Just like these are the things I was talking about with women. A lot of times we graduate, then we want to get married, we want to buy a house, we want to have kids, we're going to need a car to get to work, all of these huge things. And we have like no money because there's also a lot of student loans. So that's kind of where I was. I took on all these different big things and I was really, really focusing on paying off debt. And we were kind of coming up to a place where we were going to be debt free other than our mortgage soon. And I was like, well, now what do we do with our money? Because I had kind of heard chirpings like, if your interest rate on your mortgage is below a certain percent, you shouldn't pay it off ahead of time. You should be investing that money. And I was like, investing? Isn't that for just like rich white guys in their mid 50s, early 60s? But that's not true. Trust me. So I just started learning about investing in 2020. And I also wanted to point that out because I just started learning in the summer and I've already learned so much. And I've learned it all mostly from like podcasts, a few books, Facebook groups. And I thought, who gets their, like financial information or any information from Facebook groups? But there are a lot of really knowledgeable people. And if anybody in a Facebook group says something wild or not correct, there will be 20 people that will tell you that is not true. So it is actually a decent place to not, get financial advice, but just information, basic information. So I just learned a lot just fishing for information. So Jess, if you want to go to the next slide. There, you might not really be able to see this chart, but I'm going to do a close up. So as I was saying, I graduated with a ton of student loans. I wanted to, get married, buy a house, all that. And I'm going to say something that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I'm kind of good for that. I kind of got in like this Dave Ramsey trap where I read his book and I was like, something just doesn't seem right here. But I had that like, got to be debt free tunnel vision. And I'm in like all these like debt free groups, everybody's debt free, debt free, debt free. And I was like, something is just missing here. But I didn't know enough to figure out what it was. But I was just plugging along, paying off all that debt, paying off all that debt. And the big thing that was missing was I wasn't thinking long term at all. I wasn't thinking about retirement. I was like, that's how many years away? But you need to start early. That is one of the most critical things. Like there was nothing in any of that, mindset about investing. I personally felt like I can't invest until I have a positive net worth, until I pay off all of my debt, then I can invest. And that was such a huge mistake. I wish I would have even just invested a little bit. Like I could have afforded $25 a paycheck, $50 a paycheck, something, and then kind of slowly built up. But I should have just gotten started. And I didn't realize, I only understood how interest works against you on your student loans. But as you'll see in this chart, and in a minute, we're going to advance and I'll show you a little bit more. Interest can also really work for you. And that's something that I did not understand at all. And once I learned about it, I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm only 30, so I still have plenty of time to get into this. And here you can see, I like this, but I also don't like this. So no kid at 15 is investing $3,000 a year, okay? So don't get too hung up on this, but this is just to show you if somebody out there was investing. You can see he's at only 15 years old. Jump to the bottom there. You can see it says Billy invested only $15,000 and that grew to $1.6 million by the end of this. The next person only started at 19, invested more money, ended up with less. Then you get down to poor Kim, who still started very early. She invested way more and still ended up with way less. And now this is again ridiculous. I don't want anybody here to feel defeated like, well, I'm 56. What in the world? Doesn't matter. The only thing is just you have to start today and it will just keep increasing. So the more you're letting this go, you're missing out on this huge opportunity to have your money, have time in the market. So that's what I didn't understand. And that's why I wish I would have just started, just put a little bit away. You can still pay off your debt. You don't have to just be in one lane. You can still be making most of your money go towards your debt, but you've just got to get started. And that's what I didn't know. And that was one of my biggest mistakes. But some things that I did do right and some things that I'm still continuing to do right and some things that you can do is just talk about money. People always act like money is so taboo. I don't understand it. It pisses me off. I'm not ever talking about my money that I have in my own bank account. I'm just talking about money because there are so many concepts to money and most people don't understand how it works. Like I don't understand how a lot of it works sometimes. And the more you talk to people, you'll learn a lot from their areas of expertise. Like somebody may know a lot about their pension, somebody may know a lot about retirement in general, some people may know a lot about stocks, some people may know a lot about bonds. Whatever it is, the more you just talk about it, it's not taboo. I'm not saying I have XYZ in my bank account and these are the returns I'm getting. No, just talk about, hey, what are you doing, about your retirement? Are you invested in anything? Things like that. And then just ask questions. I ask questions all the time. One of the greatest resources is the 403BY's Facebook group. And we have that in that resource document that I had shared. When I first joined it, I was asking questions like every day, but it's how you're going to learn. Just ask people questions and find your group of people. So the 403BY's community was definitely my group of people, and like some people at work, some of my friends knew some certain things. So just finding those people was a huge help. And here was just one quote about only 14% of women even frequently discuss savings or investings and planning for retirement with family and friends. 14%. Like how, and part of this is I feel like nobody wants women to be talking about this because once we start to get the upper edge, it's game over. Once we start learning about this stuff, it's going to be game over for the men. And why wouldn't men always want to be the person in power? And hell no, that should not be how it is. There's nothing that's too complex. If you're a mom, if you could figure out how to make a baby and to keep it alive, you could easily figure out a spreadsheet. Like don't short yourself like that and say, "Oh, I just let my husband take care of it." That's nice to have, be taken care of, but what are you going to do when you get a divorce or if he has an untimely death? Then what? You let him take care of it until he can't anymore and now you're screwed. So, just start talking about it. Nothing bad is going to happen if you do. All right. Um, I just listed some of my favorite resources, podcasts, like I said, books. I also do a lot of audiobooks. You can get them free, like through Libby sometimes at your library. I buy a lot of them, but I just love podcasts and books because I can listen to them when I'm walking my dog, driving somewhere. It's a lot of good passive learning and it doesn't take a lot of time. Like I'm not sitting there studying any books, but I'm still learning a lot. And all of these resources are in that resource document that was shared. And also some things that you can do, again, that this is in that resource document. Just to start simple, there's a link that you could research what a Roth IRA is if you don't already know. There are Roth IRA calculators, so play around to see if I only invested this much now, never touched it again, what that could potentially grow to, or what, just kind of play around with some numbers. And there are some calculators on there. And another thing I'd love you to do is just like text your best friend, call her and say, have you ever even thought about retirement? Because if somebody would have said that to me last year, if my best friend would have said that to me last year, I'd be like, girl, no, heck no, that's so long. But just put the bug in somebody's ear and just see. And they may know a lot. Like you just don't know because people don't talk about it, which is bizarre. And ask coworkers, ask anybody, just start talking about it and you'll learn a lot. It's very eye-opening. And that's my contact info or social media. I'm always on Instagram way too much. So if you ever need to contact me quickly, that is a good way to hit me up on Instagram. But other than that, those are the links there in the resource page. And I think that this is the last part for mine. I think it goes to, yep, over to Danielle.
Thanks, Tara. First, I just wanted to say I was listening to Tara's mistakes, and being only 30 years old, I think you're in a great position. So you should be really proud of yourself, and I'm glad that you're in the position that you're in right now. So my name is Danielle. You can see the picture. There I am with my mini golden doodle. You might wind up hearing him bark in the background. He's our pandemic puppy. We just got him, over the summer. I teach basic skills in New Jersey. So I teach regular ed students who are either struggling in reading or math. I have 2 teenagers, which is why I got the puppy, because someone told me that when you have 2 teenagers, you need to get a puppy. So somebody's happy to see you when you walk in the house. So he is. And something important about me and why I got involved in money and finances is I got divorced when my children were only 3 and 1 year old. So I feel like I've done a lot of the roles that women do. I was a married working mom when my son was young. And then I stayed home when my daughter was born. So I was a married stay-at-home mom. And then I was actually lucky enough after I got divorced to stay home a few more years. So I was a stay-at-home single mom, which is like a unicorn. Like you don't find any of them. And it's actually a very lonely position, even though I was really lucky to have those couple of years. Then I went back to work as a working single mom. And now I'm a working mom in a committed relationship. We live together and we have a blended family. So I feel like I've done a lot of different roles and I see the different situations that women can be in. I think it's really important when we talk about women and finances to talk about the gender roles in personal finance. Some of you out there may be single, but eventually it may change for you. So it's important to understand that many married couples and even some couples that like cohabitate still follow very traditional roles when it comes to finances. Like I always think about my own parents who were baby boomers, and it was like, my dad did the investing and my mom had up the checkbook and would be writing out her checks once a month to, pay all the bills. And that is actually the way things still are for most families in America. UBS, which is a bank, it conducted a study on women and finances. And they found that women really do let their husbands take the lead when it comes to finances. But the thing that surprised me the most, because I was thinking of my parents with this super traditional relationship, a happy relationship, but very traditional. it's actually the younger women who are more likely to let their husbands take the role. I just wonder if it's because they're newer to it. Maybe they don't have as much of their own money, but 54% of millennials have their husbands handle the long-term financial decisions, meaning like your retirement, your investments, and versus 39% of boomers. So Jess, you can switch the thing. But now I wanted to talk about why should women take a greater role? And this part is the part that's a little bit sad. And I think that's the reason why people don't want to think about it is that sadly, 8 in 10 women will wind up alone at some point in their lives, whether it's due to death or divorce. At some point, there may be a time when you have to take control of all of your finances. And I think that, you don't want to be grieving either the death of a loved one or, the end of your marriage and trying to figure out all the finances at one time. And in the case of divorce, there could be a lot of financial infidelity. If you don't know what you have, you can't fight for it. If you don't know what you have, you're going to wind up with less money in the end. And I will tell everyone, I remember very clearly when I got divorced, there's actually a paper you need to sign in New Jersey. I don't know if it's in every state, that you sign this paper saying, I understand that I will have a different standard of living once I am divorced. Because even if you get alimony or child support or anything like that, things are different when you're running your own household. But the other thing is that I think when you have equal participation, you're part of a team. So if you're part, if you have your own money and it's completely separate and you never talk about it with your spouse, you have no idea what's going on in the other person's life. You don't have shared goals. You don't have an idea of where you're headed with that big picture of finances. But if you have all of the money in one person's hands, it's one person making all those decisions, deciding if they want to be aggressive, deciding when your retirement will be. So it just leads to greater equity. But I also think, and I know it sounds a little funny, but it's like it leads to more cohesiveness and like intimacy, because you're talking about, like, when my partner and I talk about our retirement funds, we're not talking about it like, oh, whoa, look how much money I have. It's not that exciting. We're not talking about it that way. We're talking about it in, wow, I think I'm going to be able to retire at this time. And wouldn't it be really nice if this is the kind of trip we take, or, this is what we want to do. So I think that financial intimacy is an important part. The other part of really why women should take that greater role is another part that's a little bit sad, is that financial decisions can, if they're only made by one person, it can really restrict a woman. And if a woman doesn't have access to her own money, if she doesn't know how to access her accounts, financial abuse can happen. And that's when a woman can't access her money, when she can't spend her own money. I do have some friends who are my age who have a job, they work 40 hours a week, and their husband, is the person who holds the purse strings. And, if they buy a $20 shirt at Target, it's being questioned. So I think it's important for a woman to have some money that is her own. And you and your partner can decide how much that is. Maybe it's a certain percentage of your paycheck. Maybe it's a certain dollar amount that is your money. So this way you have control of it. So I'm hoping that you will take some action and sit down with your partner and look at all your long-term savings and create those shared goals. I should have also said to actually have your partner look at the small things, because my boyfriend just said the other night, what? The electric bill was that much money? Like, he has no idea about the small things. So when I wrote these action items, I was thinking about the big picture, but it's also good for him to know about the small ones. It's also really important that you know the usernames and passwords for all your joint accounts, because if something happens to your partner, how are you going to access them? And as my parents got older, one of the things my dad did for my mom was make a binder, and the binder has all their information in it. So this way she can find it. Even though my parents still have this very traditional role, my mom now has, the usernames, the passwords. She knows where all the accounts are, just if something should happen. And the last the last action item would be to, open a savings account and a credit card in your own name. So this will help you build your own credit. It'll give you a place to deposit some discretionary spending that's yours. And even though I'm saying all this, like, I still believe that having a partner in life and a partner in finances is still really important. So that's what I have for everyone. Oh, and my favorite resources. Well, the podcast, I love Afford Anything. And Her Money with Jean Chotsky is a really good one for women. Planet Money is great if you're a nerd like me, because it's really more about the big picture. It's more about like the economy rather than just personal finance, but it's really interesting. Susie Orman can sometimes be very grating to some women, but when I was going through my divorce and she was still on TV every like Saturday night, that was my excitement. And, I think she has some good advice for women, just to, take control of your finances. And then, of course, Teach and Retire Rich, which is 403BY's podcast with Dan and Scott. I do love. And I am not as well connected as Tara. You can get me at Danielle Greco at hotmail.com. You can find me on Facebook. My children have let me know that I'm totally a boomer because I have Hotmail and Facebook. So I'll have to update it with Gmail and Instagram at some point, but that's what I've got.
Mute myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Cummings Koski, and I'm the only non-teacher on the call, but I'm a lover of teachers. I had the honor to be on the 403B podcast. And when Jessica asked me to be on this panel, I'm like, so I'm not a teacher. But I am a financial educator, so I'm happy to be adjacent to teachers and absolutely love teachers. So I'm gonna. Someone had in a chat about where should they start investing and things like that. I'm gonna touch on that just a little bit, but let me just tell you guys a little bit about myself. First of all, I do want to recognize that February is Black History Month, and it has been all month. And I've done a lot around Black history and learning the rich history from the Black perspective. But I grew up in South Carolina and Georgia. So if there's any South Carolina and Georgia teachers, that's what I consider home. But I live in Ohio now, but I will always consider South Carolina and Georgia home because that's where all of my family live. And eventually I'd love to go back there because after last week and that freaking cold and snow, it just reminded me I need to be back down south. Obviously, I'm a Black single mom. I have one daughter. I retired early in 2019 in my 40s. And I really had this burning dream to create a financially literate society. So that was my whole mission for a very long time. And to get to the position to where I was able to kind of cut out of corporate America early and follow that dream, I'm honored. And everything that I'm doing now is all around financial literacy and education. And that's why I'm here today. Before I retired, I was making less than six figures. So I like to say I was really on a trajectory as far as my salary, close to that of a teacher. I was looking at when I started at the company that I was with, I was there for 20 years. I started out with like $30,000. And when I left, I averaged like the last 10 years, and it turned out to be about $80,000 on average for the last 10 years. But that was, at the peak of my career. But I started at about 30,000. I do a lot of personal finance workshops, a lot like this. I love to be on panels, anything about money, personal finance, advocacy, education. That's why I love the 403BYs, the Teach and Retire Rich, platforms like this, and trying to make money not such a taboo topic to talk about, like Tara was mentioning. It's like, we just need to talk. So I love to do that. And right now I am back in school as a student. I'm pursuing my master's degree The degree is personal financial planning and financial therapy, because I think there's some psychology, a lot of psychology behind all of our money decisions. So that's where I'm at now. And you can go to the next slide, Jessica. So I like to talk about all these mistakes that I made. I mean, I feel like I'm in a decent position now, but boy, it was a rocky road getting there. So I've made many mistakes, and stakes, S-T-E-A-K-S. So all over the place, I'm making all these mistakes, but there was one that really sticks with me. I consider it one of my biggest mistakes as a woman. So at the time of my divorce, and if anyone here has been divorced or knows someone that's been divorced, basically at that time, they take all the retirement money, they put it in one pot, and they split it down the middle. So by the time that, so I was married for about 10 years, and my husband and I, we were making about the same money. I think the last few years we were married, he was making a little bit more than me, but it wasn't a huge disparity. Like, it wasn't like I was a teacher and he was a doctor. We were both, had a career that was making a similar salary. Well, when it came down to looking at our retirement accounts, I had $20,000. And at this point, I'm in my early to mid 30s. And I had $20,000 in my retirement account. And I thought that was pretty good. Well, come to find out, my husband had $120,000. So that was $100,000 different. So when Danielle is talking about sit down and make sure you look at everything together, when Tara's talking about know what's going on, we let a lot of times we let our husbands or our spouses or our male partners, take control and be in charge of the finances. And boy, that was a huge mistake to me. And I felt really dumb at that point. And I'm like, how on earth did that happen? And the way we had it is everything did go into one pot. So I guess whatever money I wasn't putting towards my retirement, it was paying the bills. So it was just, it was very heartbreaking to me, because I felt like I should have known. I felt like I should have been smarter with my own retirement. I mean, just so many things going through my head. I mean, it took at least 2 years for me to kind of, get over the emotion of the divorce and these silly mistakes that I made with finances. So this was sort of the wind behind my back saying, okay, Jackie, now you have to pull it together. You got to learn this stuff yourself. And you need to start being smart about your money and investing. So whoever asked that question about how do you even start investing, that was my question. How do you even start getting your arms around this? It just seems so complicated. And so I started off on this journey. So I started doing a lot of things, very different. But I want to show you on the next slide kind of what that, I call it my $100,000 mistake, right? Because there was $100,000 between what I had and what my husband had. So once I had that, and that was roughly 2005, I took that account. So his company split up the account down the middle. So I had my own account like I worked for the company. Eventually, I rolled it over to an IRA. But the point of that is that I never put any money in that account, and I never took anything out. And as time went on, I was kind of glad that I kept that siloed. So I got to see how that money grew. And as I was educating myself, one of the first things I did was I joined a stock investment club. It's supported by an organization called Better Investing. And that started opening my eyes and helping me understand and become less intimidated of the stock market. So I started doing smarter things with my money, including this IRA that started with the $60,000 that I got whenever we finally got divorced. So on average, I earned about a 10.5% return. Now I did all this analysis just for you guys, because it's also painful when I revisit it, but I had about a 10.5% return over about the last 15 years. And now that account that started at $60,000 is worth $265,000. And here are the lessons that I learned. I learned about compound growth and how powerful that is. I learned not to be afraid of investing. Just looking at the history of the stock market, if you're looking at big chunks like 10 years at a time, the market's going to go up, and it goes up about 8 to 12%, depending on what index you're investing in. Not terribly complicated as I thought it was. I just asked a lot of questions. There was so much I didn't know. And once I got around people that were anxious to answer my questions, that wanted me to ask questions, I just kept them coming. I kept them coming. And when people got tired of me asking questions, then I would go to a Facebook group where I would go to YouTube, where I could actually dig and dig and dig for my answers. And the biggest thing that I learned in that was that at 38, I was about 38 when I finally started pulling it together. This was 2 years after my divorce. 38 is not too late to learn about your money, because that's basically when I started finally pulling it together. So you can go to the next slide, Jessica. So here's what that $60,000 to $265,000 looks like. So about 15 years, look how much it grew. The S&P 500, and the S&P 500 is just the 500 largest US companies. So think about Google, Apple, McDonald's, Walmart. That's what's in the S&P 500. So that returned about 9.6%. And I did slightly better than that, but the whole thing is I really didn't do much better than throwing it in an index fund. So I was pretty happy that I knew to put it in the stock market, and I just chose an index fund. I figured the S&P 500 sounded great. It's all these big companies where I use their products and services all the time anyway. But look at that swoop, from $60,000 to $265,000. Like that was, I don't know, I felt a little vindicated, when I had this one account that I could use as a measurement to say, I think I learned it. I think I learned it. So I like to talk, a lot of times when people are trying to explain the stock market, it just seems so freaking complicated. And it can be, it's a lot of different moving parts, but I just learned to, I guess I'm a teacher at heart, because I just learned to boil it down to something very, very simple, because you got to understand the basics before you start doing things like shorting GameStop, right? You don't start there, you learn the basics first. So one of the main basics is the difference in a stock and a bond. So I just did this with money. Money helps me learn things. So if I looked at the last 10 years, and if you're in bonds is just a debt in a company, but the whole idea is it's safer, it's less risk. And that's usually what people are trying to accomplish when they are investing in bonds. So as you see over the last 10 years, if you had $1,000, your money would have grown to around $1,400. And total overall, the overall bonds was up about 3.7%. That's not bad, right? It's better than a savings account. But then if you look at the blue chart, that's your stocks. And I just chose an S&P 500. Again, that's the 500 largest companies: Google, Walmart, Nike. If you had that, $1,000 would have grown to $3,800 over the last 10 years. So that's a huge difference. So when you look at these two main categories, if you want to hit the easy button, if you don't even want to figure out, well, how much should I have in bonds? How much should I have in stocks? Just choose a target date retirement fund. Okay, the target date retirement fund basically mixes stocks and bonds based on your estimated retirement date. So if you are 30, like Tara, you might have 30 years to go. They're going to do all the allocation for you. And as it gets closer, when she's at 40 and she's at 50, it's going to automatically rebalance everything for her. So that's totally the easy button. So if you don't know where to start, I would say that's sort of the 1, 2, 3 easy button, is a target date fund. Or if you want to be really aggressive, put it all in stocks and you're probably going to be okay over the long term. Now, again, we had that disclaimer in the beginning. I'm not giving any specific investment advice, but if you don't know where to start, that might be something to look at. So you can go to the next slide, Jessica. Okay, so I have a lot of money tips, but it's just 3 main categories, okay? So investing in your tax advantage accounts, I feel like the easiest way to start is with your employer. Why? Because it's automatic and normally you get a match. So if you're looking at most employers are going to have either 401k or 403b if you're a teacher, or pension, 457, something like that. That's one of the best places to start. health savings account. That's something that I have a special love for, because a health savings account, when I started learning about it, they made sense. You can actually invest in a health savings account. You have to have a high deductible plan, so that's not available to everybody, but that could be an option. If you decide to not use it to pay current expenses, you can actually hold on to that money and invest it and use it for the long term. Other ones is has nothing to do with your company. So those are your IRAs. A Roth IRA, you don't get the tax benefit now, but you get it later, and it grows tax-free. And then you've got the traditional IRA that, you know, can help with your taxes. And then if you have kids, or even yourself, 529 plans are great. And I'm in Ohio. Ohio gives me a $4,000 a year tax deduction if I want to do a 529. And the thing that a lot of people don't know, but I can't remember which law it was, but about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a law that allowed you to take money from a 529 and pay off your student loans. You can do that up to $10,000 per person. So if you're a couple, that's $20,000 that you can use to pay off your student loans, and you get a state tax deduction on the front end in most states. Dan, I don't think California does do that. California, New Jersey, I'm thinking about HSA, but you have to check your state, but most states offer a tax deduction or a tax credit for contributing to 529. So if you got to pay your student loans off anyway, why not just try to get a little bit of a break there and, you know, do it that way. And going into the taxes, there's another way you can handle student loan interest. There's a student loan interest deduction. I just become kind of a guru when it comes to taxes, because you know, when it comes to investments, you can't guarantee what it's going to return, but there's other things that can guarantee, like taxes. When I do my taxes and I have a tax savings, I know exactly what that number is. So that's why I like taxes. So there's a whole list of all these different deductions and credits that you could be eligible for. So that's worth looking at. If you're using like TurboTax or something like that, they normally will take you through that. So don't skip certain steps, because you might be missing out on some of these. So this is going to be on the document that we share with everybody, but you've got all these tax saving things that you can do. And I just want to make sure you guys are taking advantage of anything that's due to you. And then the money tracking and budgeting apps. I love the idea of apps because they make it super easy. I'm still using a spreadsheet. I keep my net worth on a spreadsheet and everything. So using a spreadsheet works, but I think apps make it even easier. So use the tools that are out there to help make things much easier for you. And these are the ones that I see the most. I'm still a skeptic, and some of these apps will make you pull in all of your accounts, like Personal Capital and all that. I'm eventually probably going to get one of them, but the main four that I hear about all the time that always get high ratings is Personal Capital, Mint, Every Dollar, which is the Dave Ramsey, and then YNAB, You Need a Budget. So that's a great starting point as well. And again, in the resource document that we're going to send to you guys, I have this on here. As you can see, I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of YouTube channels. So I learned that the best way for me to digest information is either listening or watching. So that's my preferred platform and my preferred way of getting and understanding information. So I have podcasts, YouTube, and Facebook groups, whole long list. But again, it'll be in our resource page. And then my action items or challenge is make sure right now that you know that federal student loans are at 0% and no payments through September 30th. That was in the last release bill. And if you are on the, let's see if I can remember what PSLF stands for, the Public Student Loan Forgiveness. You get that right? Okay. So if you are on that program, the $0 payments go toward your payment. So if you only had, 10 more payments left, well, you've got 9 months. Well, that's your 10 months right there. So that counts as an on-time payment, just so you know. So, I mean, that's a sweet deal. Then learn what tax advantage accounts that you have access to. I know for teachers, sometimes they have a 403B and a 457. You know, are you on a high deductible health plan where you can have a health savings account? That's another way. And then, of course, if you work for a company, there's the 401k. So know what you have access to. And if you're getting the matching, you know, there's some people that just never really paid attention to the company saying that there was a 3% match and they just didn't do anything. So I would check that out. Also, learn what tax advantage accounts you can invest in outside of your employer. So your IRAs, 529s, health savings accounts. And I listed health savings accounts in both places because the health savings account does not have to be tied to your employer. You can have it you can have as many as you want. So you can have one with your employer and you can open up another one. And why would you even do that? It's because if you have crappy investment options with your employer HSA, you may decide that you want to invest. You want to open up your own through a better provider. Then take a look at your account statement online. You know, some people never really open their statement. They didn't know that they could create an online account and check their account there. So that's that's a win to me. If you've never really looked at your statement or open it up to see what you're invested in, to see what you're contributing, sign on for an online account and check out and just take a look. Okay, that's a win right there. Once you see what you're invested in, you've got the two primary things. You've got stocks and you've got bonds. And if you do if it's a target date retirement account where it will say target date, 2055, that's the one that mixes the stocks and bonds, and that's the easy button where they do it all for you. And then see if you qualify for any of those tax breaks. The last week's webinar was the tax guy. I was on that one, but he talked about all these different tax things. So that was great. Go back and listen to that one. So I love tax breaks. Again, I love things that are predictable, and I love numbers that I know are guaranteed. With investments, you just don't know, but if you get a tax deduction, you know what that's going to be. So those are just my tips. And then if you want to get in touch with me, actually, if you have a smartphone, I'm trying something new, but if you have a smartphone and you turn your camera on, you can scan that QR code and it'll take you to my link tree, and you can get in contact with me from that link tree. You can see all the things that I've done, etc. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I can't say that I'm super active on any of them, but I try to check them regularly. And if you want to email me, I'm at moneyletterstomy.daughter@gmail.com. But again, if you turn on your camera on your phone, you can actually scan that, and that will take you to my link tree. Something that I learned in this coronavirus and all these Zoom calls. So I'm like, okay. So that's it about me, and I hope that some of those tips were helpful to you. So I'm going to kick it over to Jess and let her tell her story a little bit.